was giving America a sense of history that they had never seen before. They had that side of America that you don't get in the history books in school. I was 6. I knew that Ethel Waters meant something because as a kid growing up, my Aunt Eloise used to talk about Ethel Waters because she had worked with Ethel Waters on Broadway. And and I had a picture that my aunt had of her. So I was familiar that way. And I guess that's probably why I was so comfortable with her, because it was somebody that I had grown up hearing about from my Aunt Eloise. But of course, the excitement of my parents, Ethel Waters, also I realized she's somebody special, you know. And the fact that there wasn't that many opportunities to see African Americans on television that looked like you. So that also was special, even though it wasn't a national show. It was a local show. But it was a great experience. She was very warm. She fell in love with my mother and I and invited us to see her in Member of the Wedding. And that was my first dramatic Broadway show that I ever saw. And the ironic thing about it is Brandon DeWilde, who was in the play with her, we wound up going to school together 2 years later and becoming best friends and going through junior high and high school together. Well, they wanted me to have pickaninny braids. And Ethel Waters said, no, 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 no. You see how her hair is done by her mother? That's the way it's going to be. And so my mother used to do my hair, and then she'd have like these little curls just at the end of it, and that's exactly how I wore my hair. And but they wanted it to be pickaninny braids. They were doing Our Gang comedy, and she was saying, no, 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 that's not going to happen. It was what it was, and you just didn't have leading ladies who are black on television playing anything but that kind of role. But the fact that Ethel Waters was doing it added a certain dignity to it. And Dooley Wilson played her boyfriend, from Casablanca. So you had these amazing actors and actresses, and the part that she played, she was very important to that household. She ran the household. So she was more important than the people whose house she was working for, but you were just happy. I mean, you had Amos and Andy on, and a lot of people were not happy about that, but it was people that looked like me, and it was a joy just to see people like that on television, because back in that time, you didn't even have commercials with African American people, except for Aunt Jemima on the pancake box. And that was it. It was hysterical. It was not just funny, it was hysterical. And I mean, the relationship between Amos and Andy was priceless. I mean, it was kind of like a Laurel and Hardy situation, and they were funny. Much funnier than some of the shows I see today, because they were taking realistic stories Amos and Andy were doing. I mean, one was a taxi cab driver, and he had a wife and a daughter, and the other was his friend that was always, he was married to Sapphire, she was a terror, and her mother was a terror. And I mean, it was funny situations, and it was funny. She was an actress, and so she enjoyed doing everything. She was an amazing, amazing actress. I mean, the stuff that I saw by that time was when she did Member of the Wedding movie, and then she did Pinky. She was absolutely amazing, and there weren't a lot. And of course, she and Lena together. She could do anything. She could dance. I mean, the picture that my Aunt Eloise had of her was she had her legs straight up in the air, and she was skinny. She was known as String Bean, and her songs were double entendre back in the day, at the same time. And then she got the opportunity, Irving Berlin gave her the opportunity to do, I believe it's Thousand Cheer, and where she did Supper Time. And also she did, I think, a movie called Mamby's Daughter or something like that, that she was supposedly brilliant in. So she could do it all. She could do it all. And of course she's, you know, hysterical in Cabin in the Sky with Lena, you know. So she was, she could do it all. Doesn't get enough credit either. Well, before then, I was on Sing Along with Mitch. And that was a situation where I didn't know at the time, and I learned later on, that the network and the sponsors were giving Mitch some heat about me being on the show because the show was blacked out in the South. They wouldn't accept the show because I was on it. And they kept telling him to not have me on as a regular, only have me on now and then, or if I was on the show, then isolate me like they used to do with Lena so that they could cut me out for the South. Or does she have to do so many songs with the sing-along men? They did all kinds of things, which I found out later on. Mitch kept it from me. And Mitch said, no, she's part of the family. And he had tried for 4 years to get this show on. So for him to take that stand, this was his baby, this show, was quite something. And of course, what happened was, we were such a smash hit that the South said, forget about it. We want the show. And I got incredible, wonderful fan mail from the South. As far as the network and the sponsors were concerned, because I was too close to the sing-along men when we were doing, you know, Judy Garland numbers and Fred Astaire kind of things, and they were touching and we were touching, and so that was the thing that was driving the network kind of crazy, you know. And Mitch was not having any of those rules at all. I mean, we had Sly and the Family Stone. I thought CBS was going to have a heart attack because, you know, but we had great people on, and you know, we had the Temptations, we had Stevie Wonder. We brought a lot of people on that were not normally seen on variety shows unless it was a show like a Ed Sullivan show. Also, I had a black cameraman. I also had a black choreographer, Donna McHale, and I also had a black writer who wrote the segment that we did in the show called Sugar Hill. His name was John Amos, who went on to become a star on Good Times. And you know, he tells everybody, she discovered me. And later on, of course, it was ironic because he was my father in Roots. I wasn't supposed to do a variety show. I was signed to CBS and they were going to do a sitcom with me, and we were talking to different writers about coming up with something. So all of a sudden, when they fired the Smothers Brothers, they decided to give me a variety show, which at the time I was excited about, but behind the scenes, we weren't there to be on forever. We were there to kind of take the heat off the fact that they had fired these two brilliant guys who they weren't happy with the political statements that they were making. And so this way, it took the heat off because you couldn't say, why are you putting that black woman on, you know? And so they were very clever in their thinking. Of course, I was very naive, thinking, oh gosh, this is wonderful, they want me. But that really wasn't the case. And I tell you, what I went through before I even got on the air with hair and makeup and this, and the head of the network at the time, I'll never forget, we had lunch and with my manager, and he sat there and said, well, you're not that good looking, but we'll work out something. I thought, oh, this is not the way I thought it was going to be happening, you know. And what's so funny about it, years later, we were at a function, and who did I wind up sitting with? My husband and I wound up sitting with that gentleman who was the head with his wife. And he looked at me and said, I always knew how beautiful you were. We almost fell into our plates. We felt that there was something in the air when we were filming that. I came into the show, they had been shooting like 5 weeks, and when I walked on the set, there was just a calmness that I had never felt before. in working in television. Everybody adored Alex Haley. We would shoot something, and after it was shot, there would be this quietness. If a line wasn't right, it would be worked on, and you'd be giving a new line. You know, usually on television, it's, come on, let's hurry up, let's do this. You know, oh, that works. But it wasn't that situation, and also the story that it was telling was, for us, so incredible, because it was giving America a sense of history that they had never seen before. They had that side of America that you don't get in the history books in school. And we knew that this story that we were telling was quite a story to be told. I mean, it was an eye-opener for everybody, because it gave us a sense of pride, because the way we have been depicted had been we were just slaves on a plantation, you know. Nobody knew where we came from. How did we get there? And Alex wrote this story of people were kings and queens and had a beautiful life and were strong people, and taken away to another country where they were denied even speaking their own language and denied keeping their names, and treated like animals. And so that was a story that we as African Americans had never seen that part. And so it was a lesson for everybody. Well, first of all, I have to tell you that from the time that I read KIZZY and then got the role as KIZZY, I became KIZZY. There was something about, I knew her. Somehow I knew her. I mean, I wore her skin. And so all those experiences that she was going through, I just zoned into it. And also the fact that the history of my family and, you know, what stories I could get out of my grandmother also became a part of KIZZY. But the fact that someone would take away your child from you because of some wrong that they felt was just, you couldn't be overcome, and this is, we're going to punish you for that, is just so hurtful. So I can't even express it in words. So that day when we shot that, I just lived that, because you know you are never going to see your mother and father again. Everything that you know, everything that you had in your relationship with your parents is never going to be that way again. And even though, you know, the plantation might not be that far, it was far. And that was it. That was it. And knowing also that you knew that your mother had already had children taken away from her. And that was the thing that she kept saying to Kente, stop telling her her history, stop doing these things, because I've already lost children, you're going to put her in danger. And then the fact that the niece of the plantation owner was teaching you to read, which was also another thing. And then she doesn't back you up. You know, it was easy to play, easy to play. But I must say afterwards, it was very painful, very painful. And for Sandy too, because when we finished that scene, I was still hysterical. They had to get me water and smelling sauce because they thought I was gonna, like, you know, faint. And I had a lot of bruises, a lot of bruises. And from just doing that role. And when they said cut, no one would talk to Sandy. And Sandy was like, wow, she's kind of ostracized. And later on, she and I talked, and she said, I'm so glad we were friends before we did this, but I have to tell you, had I known really what this was going to be about, I wouldn't have done the role, wouldn't have done the role. You know, it's just I must say she played the part. I mean, when she's in that window and you see that look on her face, and like she's not moved one bit with KIZZY's hysterical thing that she's going through in that wagon. She, you know, it's like, okay, well, goodbye to her. That's why I love that scene when I finally get to spit in the cup. I finally get my revenge. One of the scenes, I tell you, that touched me also was when Richard Roundtree has to get down and on his knees and plead with George Hamilton's character to apologize. And the one thing that Richard said was, one take. Got to do this in one take because I'm not going to do this again. This was Shaft, you know, and Richard is a very proud person, and this was like, this was acting, that you had to go to a place, which all of us wound up, our characters took it to places that either we didn't want to go to, or it just took you there. And for him to have to do this was just not in his makeup at all. And during the rehearsal, you could see that he was not comfortable with this, and rightly so. And so therefore, after we were blocking and things like that, that's when he turned around and said, one take, you got to get this, because I'm not going to do this again. That was a hard scene for me to do. And we had to do a few takes on that, because the anger that is important that you see, the anger that KIZZY has against this man. She wasn't a victim. That's the main thing. The thing about KIZZY was she was never a victim. All the things that happened to her, she found a way to use it, and I'm not going to be victimized. And that's her relationship with her son. That's what's so wonderful. And it came from Kunta Kinte, who said, we got to keep the stories going. And because of him telling her that, she made sure that they were. And so she never became a victim. She had to go through a lot. But she had some clever thing that she was going to use to make that work. And so that was the hardest part in that scene, to not just show that she's being violently raped, but so you see in those eyes that not only hate, but she's going to use this. She's going to use this. They didn't think anybody was going to even want to, why do they want to see all these African American people on television? So we'll put it on every night. But America, and later on, you know, all over the world, it was captivated by this history that they had never seen. So it was a huge, huge, huge rating that happened with the show, to the point where restaurants and bars were saying, we have the big screen television, come here, have your dinner, and you can watch Roots. I was in Las Vegas rehearsing Guys and Dolls, and I get a phone call from Ann Margaret saying, you know, we've had to change the time of the show because everybody's watching Roots, including me. And so times would change. The casinos were empty. I had never seen that ever, and I had been playing Vegas a long time. Casinos were empty because people were watching Roots, and that is something in Las Vegas where people are not gambling. They are watching Roots, and it just took America by storm. It was, I've never seen anything like it then, and I don't think you'll ever see that again. I don't think that'll happen again. And of course, you know, now we have a whole different world now where you can TiVo or whatever you want to do. But for this, people had to stay home and watch this. You couldn't get room service in Vegas either. If you didn't call early and get what you wanted to eat, you couldn't get room service because everybody was in their room, ordering room service, watching Roots. We see it in our political world now when it comes to nominating people for offices and everything. Television is powerful, and doing Roots on television was I think even more powerful than if it had been a movie, because television comes into your living room You know, you're not going out to a theater to go see a movie. This comes into your living room or your bedroom, wherever you're watching the television. It becomes a part of you, and the fact that it's coming into your living room and you're seeing, I mean, there's a lot of people that didn't even know black people, you know, weren't familiar with black actors and actresses who are wonderful, but were not given this kind of opportunity. And so it was powerful in so many ways. And then all over the world. We went to Monaco, and I turned the television, and there I was speaking French. You know, I mean, every country was showing this. And about 5 years ago, I went to London, and I received an award, and from the African and Caribbean group of actors and actresses there. And I had an African tell me, he said, "Oh, I'm from that village, and I can't tell you, for us, we sat in front of that television and said, yes, somebody is talking about us and what our life is, where we came from." Powerful. Television. The slave ship, where people were put in like cattle, that was extremely hard to watch. And how many lost their lives coming to America and not knowing what has happened to you, how did you get there, and why are you on the ship. And of course the whipping, watching Kunta Kinte, who they wanted to say Toby, being whipped until he submitted to saying the name, his American name. I mean, that is very difficult. And because people were powerless, you know. They were made to watch it, and if they tried to do anything, they were either dead or going to be sold to another plantation. And watching this young African man, not where am I? Why am I here? I was the son of the chief, and what happened? And I'm being whipped like this. Just hard to watch. Well, he had pictures of everyone except KIZZY. So he had no idea, well, he had as a writer, the idea of what she should be and what she should look like. And so one day, after I had finished shooting a scene, he came with me and he said, "I just want you to know you are exactly what I wanted KIZZY to be." And I thought that was a wonderful compliment. And, you know, I thanked him because this was a strong woman. And as I said before, she wasn't a victim. And I thought that he wrote her extremely well, you know, coming from a man a lot of times, not necessarily right, strong women, you know, it's always the men, but he wrote a beautiful, beautiful, strong woman. There was a dignity and pride of these African people. They had a beautiful life. And now, also, the interesting thing that I found was that Africans were the ones who were kidnapping and giving the Africans to the white man to bring to wherever they were taking them. You know, so we have to look at that too if we're going to be truthful. But I mean, that was a very important part of history, because I know for school children, I got a lot of letters from school children, or one particular class followed the whole thing, and I finally met them. It was a great experience, and they were like, "Thank you. We didn't know. We didn't know," which is still kind of sad because it's still not in the history books. And thank God for Roots, because every time the big anniversary comes up, it gets to be shown, and another generation gets to see that part of the history. But it's not still in the history books where kids can sit in their history class and say, you know, this is where we came from. You know, we have the, you know, about the peanut and, you know, all those kind of things, but we don't have this kind of history in the history books of our schools in America. We're still holding on to that old stuff. I don't know what it's going to take to change these history books. They need to be changed. African American kid needs to be able to sit in a class and be able to turn around and say, see what we've contributed to America. If you don't know where you came from, how do you move on? How do you move on? Where's my sense of pride and dignity? Who am I? Where am I? And as I said before, we knew, well, we were slaves, okay, and we were in Africa originally. I think roots also gave a stronger connection to Africa, because I know growing up, a lot of Africans looked down on African Americans because they felt that we didn't have that kind of connection. And I think that the roots really changed that. All of a sudden, the Africans, we became closer to them in a way that we hadn't before. For the men, it got better. The men seemed to do a lot of different things, and of course, you know, Lou went on and he won an Oscar, and you know, the men did well. The women, it was tough. And for me, it took me 2 years before I got another job. And luckily, I got to do a show called Backstairs at the White House, which was, you know, a true story. But it was hard to, we thought, hey, we're here, we've arrived, they've seen how fabulous we are, and we're all going to be working all different things. And it just didn't happen. And I mean, the reality of it is that Black writers don't get an opportunity to get their things done. Those that do, it's such a process that, you know, it wears you down. And I mean, even till this day, it's hard to get something done. And so for the women, it was even harder, because they're not writing about leading ladies. So it took 2 years, and finally with Backstairs at the White House, where it was a story about the woman who was you know, it's a leading role.